Welcome to Passion for Sound, the channel dedicated to thorough and honest reviews of headphones, earphones, DACs, headphone amps, other components and accessories. Basically everything audio related except power amps and passive speakers. My name's Lachlan and my goal is to explore and discuss all kinds of audio topics, even the controversial ones, to help us all find more enjoyment from music. Thanks for watching and enjoy the video. Hey folks, welcome to another Passion for Sound audio review, and today a bit of a roundup of a bunch of different true wireless earphones and one wireless but not true wireless, as I'll explain shortly. A couple of things I just want to cover off before we get into the review, or the roundup if you like, is that I've got the builder going next door again. Hopefully this is going to be over soon. I'm as tired of it as you probably are of me mentioning it, so there might be some sounds of nail guns and the like going. I'll try and avoid them, but I apologise if they sneak through. The other thing I want to cover off is that with a roundup like this, I can't cover every single possible option on the market. So I've done my best to bring together a whole bunch of choices, including the Samsung Galaxy Pro, Samsung Galaxy Live, and the three lower price models, the Naenka Lite Pro, the Pamu Quiet Mini, and also the Boya AP100. So the idea was to bring together a few affordable options, a few premium options, and to give you a sense of what's on the market. I've also included the Nuraloop earphones because they've been my previous noise cancelling mobile earphone type solution, and so I thought that was a good option to include as well. They offer a few additional features and some drawbacks, so I wanted to compare them in the mix. So I just wanted to cover off that I've done my best to provide a wide range of options here. I recognise there are things missing. I'm not an Apple user, so I haven't included any Apple Buds, but the idea of this is to really give you an idea of whether or not it's worth spending extra for premium brands like Samsung and Nura, or whether some of these cheaper options can do just as good of a job. Before we get into talking about the features, the pros, the cons, etc. of all of these, I just want to introduce you briefly to each of the earphones, and I'm going to work in order of price. So starting here with the Boyas. So the Boya AP100 is a stick style, I'm going to call it stick style, I don't know if there's a better name for it. They're a stick style IEM and they're a semi-open design. What I mean by that is they've got the style that was first introduced by Apple, where you've got this kind of opening that is angled to face into the ear canal but doesn't actually seal it. Stepping up in terms of price, we've then got the Naenka Lite Pro. Once again, they're what I'm calling a stick style, and they're also another semi-open. Continuing up the range, we've then got the Pamu Quiet Mini, which are a stick style, but more of a sealed version. So they've got the silicone tips there to create a better seal around the ear, and they're also the first level at which you get active noise cancelling. Continuing up, the Samsung Buds Live come in next, and these are pretty unique. They're a semi-open design, but they've got this kind of kidney bean shape where they sit with a semi-open speaker into the ear and the rest of the earphone just nestling up in the top of the concha. But semi-open, just not stick design. Then we move to the Samsung Buds Pro. They've got a traditional IEM style. And finally the Nuraloops, which have the hook design, and they sort of sit in the ear, so they don't seal deep in the ear like an IEM, so they're not working quite like the Pamu Quiet Mini or the Samsung Buds Pro, but they do seal off the ear canal, so I'm treating these more as a closed. The table that I'm showing you on screen now is a quick summary of the features and the prices of each of these units. I've listed them from the bottom being the cheapest all the way through to the top being the most expensive, but I do want to point out that these prices are somewhat approximate because I've taken them in most cases from Amazon, but in looking around you can sometimes pick up cheaper deals. So take these as approximate pricings and approximate levels, not exactly hard and fast numbers. While we're talking prices, I should mention that the lovely people from Naenka have offered a 16% off discount code for anyone watching this video. I'll put a link through to their website and the code down below. So if you think the Naenkas sound good after hearing what I have to say, you can go through and buy yourself a pair with the 16% discount. That brings them down almost level with the cheapest option on the list here, so that might make it appealing to you. What I found as I went through all the specs for these earphones was that many of them didn't list a lot of details, such as which codecs they were able to use and whether or not they were IP rated for dust and or moisture. So I've only included here what was readily available to share. In most cases, it seems that the earbuds tend to use either SBC and or AAC codecs, with only one of them mentioning aptX HD and none of them mentioning LDAC. Now, if that's all gobbledygook to you, don't worry too much about it. I think realistically, in the case of true wireless earbuds, there's not much point worrying too heavily about which codecs you're using. As you'll hear me talk about, the quality of these doesn't really come to the level of a wired connection, and so try to eke out that very, very last little bit of quality it's probably questionable as to whether it's worth it. Certainly some of them do sound better than others, and that's probably the part that's more important as opposed to which codec is used. You'll also notice that some of these provide active noise cancelling and some of them don't, and also that most of the battery lives are pretty similar. The Nuraloops being an exception where they've got a longer battery life in the individual earphones themselves, but they don't have a charging case. So as you're looking at this table, what you're seeing is, in most cases except the Nuraloops, the first number is the amount of playback per charge of the earbuds themselves, and then the number in brackets is the total playback time, including the amount of charge available in the case. So looking at the Galaxy Buds Pro, for example, they've got a 5-hour playback from the earbuds themselves, but you can get a total of 18 hours playback, including what's in the earbuds plus what's in the case. Finally, it's worth mentioning that the Galaxy Buds do offer EQ presets. The Pamu Quiet Mini does have sort of an EQ preset. It's only really got 2 options, so I haven't listed it there, and I did have a few problems using the app to select it. Ultimately though, across the board, other than some of the form factors of these, which I'll talk about shortly, and whether or not they've got noise cancelling or not, most of these are pretty similar across the board. Of course, I'll talk about the differences between them shortly, but I just wanted to highlight that there's a lot of similarities between all of these units, and the differences aren't extreme. So in other words, it's going to come down more to how they perform and less about raw features, unless you happen to have a very specific use case where maybe the low latency mode of a couple of these is really useful. But for the average person looking to have a pair of earbuds for commuting, walking, working around the house, whatever it might be, most of these are going to do the job well, and it's going to come down to the question of exactly what level of sound quality you like and whether there do happen to be any specific features you're looking for. So let's talk now about the usability of these. Overall, I'd say that all of these were highly usable. There's nothing too difficult about any of them. They all work pretty easily in terms of pairing, and they've all got pretty similar control methods. One thing I do want to flag is I don't particularly like the touch controls on most of these devices. With the exception of the Nuraloops, where they've got a really clear space for the touchpad, most of the rest of them, their touch space is a little bit ambiguous. The Naenka's probably got the most well-defined touch space of the non-Nuraloop options, and the rest of them you've just got to hope you hit the right spot when you go for the tap. That's not so much an issue for single taps, but because most of them use double and sometimes triple tap options, the problem is if you don't get your tap in exactly the right spot, you might miss the first one or the last one, and so instead of tapping twice or 3 times, you only tap once or twice, and therefore you tell the earphone to do something you don't want it to do. So that for me is a slight drawback, but it's common to all of them, so it's not really something you can separate them on, except for the Nuraloop, which has a really large touch area and has just 2 modes of touch, so 1 and 2 taps, as well as a rotational option, which I really like on those. For the rest of them, they all work in much the same way, with 1 tap, 2 tap, 3 tap, in some cases tap and hold. The majority of these have a 3-way system where they'll give you single, double and tap and hold, or maybe single, double and triple. In the case of the Samsungs, they've got a 4-way option with single, double, triple and touch and hold. So they all give you different options there. Some of them give you control over which actions are assigned to what number of touches. That would be something like the Pamu Quiet Mini, for example, and the Samsungs. Others, though, it's preset and you can't do anything about it in the case of the Naenka and the Boya. So it's one of those things where once you get used to it, it's probably not too bad. I certainly found it very confusing because I was jumping between all of these, trying to remember which ones did which function for which number of presses was really quite challenging, and so I haven't tried to break down which of the combinations of presses I think is better or worse, because ultimately I think once you learn it, it's going to be fine. It's the getting used to it that is the issue. While we're still talking usability, functions and features and the like, I want to talk about a few specific things from some of these models. The Naenka Lite Pro here was a little bit troublesome for me in that once or twice I've put it back in the case, which should switch off the earphones and disconnect them from the phone, but nothing happened, so my phone was still connected even when I was walking around the house. What that meant was that first of all I drained the batteries on the Naenkas faster. The other thing was it meant that my phone was sending the sound through to the Naenkas if I went to answer a phone call or tried to listen to music on another source. So that was a minor drawback. It could have been user error, so I don't want to be too harsh on the Lite Pros here because that's what it could have been causing. It could have been me, in other words. But I did want to flag that that was the only model that it happened with. All of the others were absolutely seamless. When I put the earphones back in the case, everything switched off and my phone was released from the Bluetooth, and vice versa. The earphones were released as well. While we're talking about some of the little ins and outs, the stick style earbuds, like the Pamus, like the Naenkas, and like the Boyas, so this style with a stick, I did find that these were more inclined to come out of my ear if I was doing something. So for example, if I went for a ride with a set of these in my ears and then I went to take off my helmet, because the straps of the helmet go around your ear, it's really easy to knock them out. In fact, with the Pamu Quiets one day, I did manage to knock them out, saw them fall to the pavement, bounce up to about knee height and then land again. Thankfully there's no significant damage, but it's not something I'd want to be doing to them regularly, and it's an easy way to lose or break an earphone. So do keep that in mind. You may want to choose more of an earbud style like the Samsungs rather than the stick style like the Naenka, Boya and Pamu. While we're talking security in the ear, I should mention that the Nuraloops are by far the most secure because they do actually have the wire that goes over the ear. So that's the Nuraloops there. So that loop there goes over the ear like in a wide IEM, and the cable runs behind your neck. So that's good from a security point of view. It's not so good from a comfort point of view and an ease of use. It means you have to wear both left and right all the time, although you can have one obviously out and hanging down over your shoulder, but you have to have them both on your person. It also means they can get caught up with things. So again, using the cycling situation, when I put the helmet on, the helmet trapped the cable of the earbuds against my neck and gave me less flexibility if I wanted to take the earphones off. So there's pros and cons with a lot of these. I think the Samsungs are probably the best middle of the road because they both sit in the ear with nothing sticking out to get bumped. That said, they're not as secure as the Nuras, so there's that toss up there. Getting a good secure fit is also a little bit trickier with the Samsungs than it is with the stick style ones. So they've all got their variations, as you probably come to realize by now. And so for me, a lot of this test came down to sound quality, both in terms of the microphone quality and also the speaker quality. Before I get to those, I want to talk about two more specific things, and they're both in relation to the Samsung Galaxy Buds Pro. So the first thing I want to talk about is they've got this, in theory, great feature called Voice Detect. So the idea is that when you speak, the earphones hear that you're speaking and they switch on transparency mode, meaning you can hear the rest of the world around you, and allow you to have a conversation with people. So it dims the music and it also switches on transparency mode. The problem with that though is that when I was out riding with them in my ears, I found that other sounds like certain engines of cars going past would trigger the voice mode and the earphone would dim. I was listening, I think, to an audiobook at the time, and so I lost a good chunk of my audiobook while I waited for the sound to come back. The other problem with it is that if it's not detecting your voice, it switches itself back into noise cancelling mode after I think 10 seconds, a short period of time. So if you're in a conversation with somebody and maybe there's a pause in the conversation for some reason, or you've finished the first part of the conversation, they've gone away and they come back to talk to you again, they talk to you as if your noise cancelling is off, but the noise cancelling is re-engaged. So a few times when I was around the house, my wife would come to talk to me, I'd have to say hold on. In saying hold on, Voice Detect would kick in and switch off the noise cancelling from the Samsungs. She'd then talk to me. We'd have a back and forth conversation, we'd finish that conversation, the noise cancelling would switch back on, she'd then come back to talk again, I had to say hold on, and we had to start the conversation over again. So in theory it's a good idea, but I found it really only works well if you're the one initiating the conversation. It doesn't help if other people are talking to you. One thing I haven't been able to test with it, but I would be concerned about, is that if you are in an environment like an office where lots of people might be talking, I don't know how good it is at separating the sound of your voice from the sound of other people's. So if you had somebody sitting next to you at another desk, it might be that their voice will sometimes trigger the Voice Detect. So for me, it's a feature I've just turned off and not really missed. You can easily, with touch controls, turn noise cancelling on and off or transparency mode, and so for me, that's the way I'd use these. While we're talking about interesting features that don't work particularly well, I also found 360-degree audio with the Samsungs to be pretty troublesome. Now, what this is intended to do is that you're meant to be able to put in the Galaxy Buds Pro, watch a movie, and if you turn your head or move around at all, it's going to send the sound off to the different side and essentially mean that the sound from your phone always sounds like it's coming from where the phone is in space compared to your head. That's a really nice idea in theory, but the reality is if I'm watching a movie, I actually want the sound to be coming to me the way it's been designed in the movie. So if something's happening off to the right of screen, I want to be hearing it off to the right. The fact that I've turned my head to the left for a second doesn't mean that I want to hear all of the entire movie soundtrack skewed off to the right-hand side and not be able to know what's happening where. So for an example, let's imagine you've got dialogue happening on screen. You've got three people talking. And let's imagine that one of them is about to pull a knife, and there's going to be a sound effect where you hear them pull a knife. So you've got three voices that if you're facing dead onto the screen, you can hear voice 1, voice 2, voice 3. When you turn your head while watching it, let's say you turn to the left, what that means is that voices 1, 2 and 3 are now all skewed across to the right-hand side. If one of them then pulls a knife while you've looked away, you can't hear which one of them it was based on the spatial location of the sound, because now they're all clustered on the right-hand side. I would assume that's going to be a problem for gamers as well, where if you turn away, it's going to skew your perception of the gaming space, the battlefield, whatever it is, based on the way you've turned your head. I also found for things like YouTube, I put my phone on the bench, walked around in the kitchen, and just having the sound move within the soundstage based on where I was walking, I personally found really off-putting and found no benefit to it. So I don't know if I'm wrong. If you've got a great way to use this, let me know in the comments below. I personally found the 360 audio a bit of a gimmick and not particularly helpful or useful. So straight away what we've done is taken two of the key features of the Samsung Galaxy Buds Pro and said they're pretty much useless in my opinion and my usage. So all of a sudden we're left with the Galaxy Buds Pro not being particularly dissimilar from the Galaxy Buds Live, other than their form factor and potentially their sound quality, which I'll talk about now. So first up, let's talk about mic quality. For many people, you're going to be using these earbuds and a phone call is going to come through at some point in time. You're going to want to be able to take that call and speak to the person using the earbuds you've already got in your ears. So it's really important, I think at least, that they do a decent enough job of transmitting your voice back through to the caller. To put these to the test, I've recorded a bit of test audio using, to my advantage for once, the building site next door. So I went outside this afternoon and there was some earth moving equipment going, so there was an engine running, there was some reversing beepers, the noise of the metal claw or the scoop of the earth mover digging into the soil, and I think some concrete was hit from time to time. So there was plenty of background noise to really test which of these were doing a good job at keeping the voice clearly separated from the background noise around me. I'll play each of those samples now and then we'll come back and talk about what I found as I listen to those same samples. Before I play this clip, I should mention that I'm pretty sure the app I was using for the recording was degrading the sound quality coming through the Bluetooth. As you'll hear when you listen to the clip in a second, the introduction was recorded using the phone microphone and it was recorded by the app at a much higher bitrate. So I think what's happened is that when I've switched to Bluetooth, the bitrate of the recordings dropped dramatically, and that's the reason the sound of all of them is probably not ideal. So what you should be listening to when I play the clip in a moment is the separation of the vocal, my speaking voice, from the background noise in the environment. Don't worry about the general sound quality. They're all going to be better, I believe, in a phone call situation. Hey folks, I'm recording outside. There's some works going on as usual next door. Hopefully this building's going to be over soon, but for now I'm going to use it to my advantage to test the sound cancelling qualities of the true wireless and almost true wireless earphones in this Roundup. Moving over now, I'm going to start at the bottom of the scale price-wise with the Boya AP100s. So I'm now recording with the Boya AP100s. I've got the left and right earpieces in my ears in the same place as you just heard in the previous recording. I'm now recording from the Naenka Lite Pro. Once again, same location, left and right earpieces both in place, and the work's still going on next door. We've now moved on to the Pamu Quiet Mini, I should say. Once again, both earpieces in, same sort of noise going on. It's actually gone up a little bit because there's some reversing of the earth mover next door. So this shows you good what the Pamu can do. Now we are using the Galaxy Buds Live. Just another side note on this one is that the noise cancelling on these being semi-open isn't anywhere near as good as it was on the Pamu, and I'm expecting much better things as well from the Buds Pro. But this is more about the audio recording at this stage, so same work going on, left and right earpieces both in my ears. Now we're on to the Samsung Galaxy Buds Pro, left and right earpieces installed, work's still going on next door. The noise cancelling is much better from these, but I'm noticing that also I'm getting more of a sense of the sound inside my head because I'm not getting any of that sound transferred as I speak back around into my ears. So I don't actually enjoy talking on this as much as the others, but the noise cancelling is working quite well, and we'll see how the audio goes. Finally now we've got some Nuraloop
Noise cancelling is excellent. The sound of the truck next door is the lowest it's been from all of them. But as a result, similar to the Buds Pro, I've now got more sound inside my head. Just a nut earpiece is both inserted as it has to be with these, and the works are still going on next door and actually the closest to me now than they were before.
To me, the Boya was the poorest of the lot. I found the sound quite garbled and hard to understand, and I also found when I tried them to make a phone call, the person on the other end was having trouble hearing me. So to me, the Boyas are probably not a particularly good option for taking phone calls unless you're going to be in quiet spaces. If you're going to be in a quiet office or at home without much background noise, they might be fine. But for me, they weren't the best option in terms of call quality. Moving up now in terms of price to the Naenka Lite Pro, I think it did a much better job than the Boyas at separating the background noise and my voice. So for me, the sound was relatively intelligible, you could understand it, and you couldn't hear too much of that background noise considering the levels of noise I was working in. Stepping up again in price, the Pamu Quiet Mini I thought was excellent. Particularly for a cheaper earphone, I thought it did a great job of separating the voice from the background noise, and overall was one of the most intelligible solutions of all of these on the table. Enjoying this video? If you are and you'd like to help me make more videos like this one, there are lots of ways you can help, and most of them don't cost you a cent. You can help for free by liking this video, subscribing and ringing the bell, sharing this video on social media or your favourite audio forums, or by making your next purchases using any of the affiliate links in the description. Obviously that's not technically free, but you're not spending anything extra and it all helps out. Want to go a step further? You could buy some merchandise, t-shirt, hoodies, caps and the like, or you can join the Passion for Sound family on Patreon. It's a growing community with plenty of interesting discussion and your chance to influence what happens on the channel. Check out the description for more information and links where relevant. But for now, let's get back to the video. Continuing up in price, I thought the Galaxy Buds Live did a pretty good job and possibly did a better job than the Galaxy Buds Pro. That could be due to the placement of the mics or the way it's using the data from those mics, I'm not sure, but I thought the Galaxy Buds Live were better at separating the sound from the noise, so the voice from the noise I should say, and also just generally providing a better clarity in the voice. And finally to me, the Nuraloops had a really distinctive tone in their sound. Everything was a bit warmer and smoother sounding, but I felt like it still retained pretty good clarity. Suspecting that the app is reducing the quality of all of them, I actually think the Nuraloops may be doing the best overall job with calls, and I've certainly not had any problems using them for calls in the past. So with that in mind, I think all of these did an okay job with the background noise, probably with the exception of the Boya, and I think the Pamu Quiet Mini were probably a standout for me given their performance for the price. So if phone call quality is important to you, that test might have swayed you in a particular direction. But it's still important potentially to consider the sound quality and how sound quality and mic quality marries up with some of these models. Because I can tell you right now, what you're going to hear me talk about in terms of sound quality doesn't match mic quality. And to talk that through, I'm going to once again start at the bottom of the range price-wise and work my way up. So we're starting with the Boya AP100. Now this wasn't particularly impressive in terms of mic quality, but I have to tell you, it's a really nice sounding wireless IEM if you're just thinking about listening to music or audiobooks or whatever, but from a listening point of view, it's really, really good for the price. The bass is solid despite its sort of semi-open design. The mids are nice and thick, but they're not rolling anything off or smoothing everything over. They've got a nice richness to them, which is going to be excellent in this style of earbud because if you're out and about, you want to make sure you've got enough weight to the notes, both in the bass and the mids, to overcome any background noise, particularly for a semi-open design. The soundstage is also quite good. It's got reasonable width, not particularly good depth, but again, for a true wireless, I don't expect exceptional performance in terms of things like soundstage. What I'm looking for is just an overall good frequency response, overall signature in other words. And for me, the Boyas do that really, really nicely. If we now compare them to the slightly more expensive Naenka Lite Pro, I found the Naenkas to be not as good as the Boyas from a pure listening point of view. The Naenkas had a thicker overall sound, which created a sense of congestion in the soundstage and just a general sense of less resolution. So whilst the Naenkas clearly bested the Boyas in terms of microphone quality, I think the tables are turned when it comes to listening to music. The slight problem for me is that the Boyas, it seems, may maybe almost unusable on calls in some circumstances, whereas the Naenkas are going to offer you a decent listening experience, not as good as the Boyas but okay, and still give you call quality. So it's a bit of a trade-off. If you're just looking for music listening, the Boyas I would say is the better choice. If you do want to be listening and talking, the Naenkas out of those two is probably the better choice. But let's move up a little bit and see if one of the other competitors for not too much more money can do an even better job. And that brings us to the Pamu Quiet Mini. The Pamu Quiet Mini for me is absolutely fantastic. Within the app for these, you can flip a switch that is meant to go to what they call original sound. And I tried changing that. I had some problems with the app in that regard. In all other ways, the app worked really well, but I couldn't seem to get it to properly engage this original sound mode. So for the sake of this review, all of my comments are using the default setting, which is not the original sound mode. It's obviously some update or change they've made. So I'm guessing it's meant to be an improvement, and that's the version that I used for all of the reviewing and therefore all of my comments here. I found that the Pamu Quiet Mini was a more resolving and cleaner sound than either of the first two budget semi-open models. Despite being sealed, it had potentially slightly less bass weight, but it was a much tighter and punchier bass. It still has plenty of bass, and I think that's really important for something that you're going to be using with background noise if you're commuting, walking, etc., because you're going to need to offset the background noise that gets through bone conduction and into your head. So you want a warmer sound to start with, and that's where I think the Pamu Quiet Mini is doing a fantastic job of still giving a great sense of warmth and bass response, but not going too far and keeping things really clean as a result. One nice touch with the Pamus is that the sound quality is absolutely consistent whether you're using noise cancelling, no noise cancelling, or transparent mode, where it's also piping in your surrounding noise into the earphones as well. So whichever setting you have it on, they sound great. I think they're a really exceptional sounding earphone. And in fact, at this point, if I could only choose from these bottom three budget models, I'd be really happy from a listening point of view with at least two of them, being the Pamu Quiet Mini and the Boya. From an overall usability point of view, I think the Pamus win out though, because their call quality and their listening quality are both better than either of the more budget options and those semi-open models. I do think having the seal around the ear and the active noise cancelling is a big part of why they're better. So whilst you're spending a little bit more money, I think it's worth it with the Pamu Quiet Mini. But rather than stopping there, let's now look at the premium options and see if it's worth going beyond the Pamu Quiet Mini to get something like the Samsungs or the Nuraloops. Still continuing in the price order, let's go next to the Samsung Buds Live. So these are the jelly bean shaped ones that I mentioned before, and they're a semi-open design, as I've already mentioned, which led to a few problems for me. The sound from the Samsung Buds Live was all sort of focused up in the forehead, and then this weird kind of incongruent flip out to the side for some of the signal. And so what it led to for me was a soundstage that wasn't particularly coherent. It was interesting, but it was distracting. The sound has an openness to it, which I did like, but that was contrasted by that slightly messed up soundstage that I didn't particularly appreciate. I also found that the sound was tilted a little bit too bright for my tastes. It was nice quality sound, but just a bit too trebly, even when I changed the EQ setting to the soft mode, which interestingly enough was my preference on both of the Samsung models. But in the case of the Buds Live, I felt it still didn't do enough to tame the treble and left things sounding just a little bit treble focused and a little bit thin as a result, or maybe not thin, but unnatural sounding. I think largely the problem with the Buds Live for me is that in their balance, the mid-range is a bit sucked out. And so no matter which EQ you try them on, there's a hollowness to the sound, and I think that's part of where the incoherency is coming from in the soundstage, is that there's no weight or body to the mid-range. So you've got some sounds up here, some sounds thrown out there, and no mid-range weight to kind of pull it all and hold it all together. So for me, the Buds Live are a bit disappointing given the price tag, and I would choose the Pamu Quiet Mini from a sound quality point of view over the Buds Live. So what about the Buds Pro? Those to me are fantastic. They're a really great sounding IEM, whether or not you're talking true wireless or even general IEMs. I thoroughly enjoy them. Their tuning is excellent, but as I've already alluded to, I most liked them on the soft EQ setting. I felt like on the normal setting, there was just a touch too much treble once again, but that's going to be very much personal preference, and I am quite treble sensitive. The mids are much better than in the Buds Live, and the overall sound signature tilts just a little bit warmer, which, as I've already talked about, I think is really important for a mobile style device like this to deal with the background noise you're likely to be around. The soundstage from the Buds Pro is quite wide, it's quite spacious. For a true wireless, it's not going to compete with a great pair of IEMs or even a budget pair, so putting it up for $189, putting it up against, say, the T2 Plus or something similar with a decent dongle DAC, I still think you're going to get better sound out of the Tin Hi-Fi T2 Plus and the dongle. But for a true wireless, I think the Samsung Buds Pro are absolutely fantastic. Their bass is punchy but well controlled. As I've already mentioned, the rest of the signature with the mids and the treble in soft EQ mode is really well balanced. They just do everything right for me. So forgetting the fact that they've got that 360 audio and the voice detect that I think are a bit of a sort of a throwaway feature that doesn't work like it should, they do a great job if you just look at the basics. Call quality, sound quality, comfort, control, they're really excellent. So the final question is, can the more expensive, again, Nuraloops with their connected style design, can that outperform something like the Samsung Galaxy Buds Pro? Now, the Nuraloops are a little bit unique in that they have a special custom tuning system. So if you're not familiar with the Neuro products, being the Nuraloop and the Neurophone, they use a special calibration system to test your hearing when you put them on and to produce a hearing profile matched to your ears. Now, some people think these are a gimmick. Knowing the science they're built on and having tested them thoroughly, I can tell you it's absolutely not a gimmick. It produces a different sound profile for different people and a fairly consistent profile regardless of when you do the measurements, as long as you're not in background noise. So it's definitely measuring the ears, it's definitely producing good profiles, and knowing what I know about my small amounts of hearing loss, it does an accurate job of assessing my hearing and producing an appropriate profile. Now, the tuning curve is another question. I don't know what their target curve is for their tuning, but the end result for me is a sound that's dynamic and punchy and fun. So I like the Neuro approach. I'm not suggesting it's perfectly neutral or accurate or true to life, but it produces a fun and enjoyable sound. So with that in mind, putting the Nuraloops into this comparison, I'd say, depending on how well the profile is done, so whether you've been in background noise and the like, if you get the profile right, these produce, I would say, as good a sound as the Samsung Galaxy Buds Pro, probably a little bit better than the Pamu Quiet Mini, and those for me are the three that are pretty much neck and neck, with maybe the Buds Pro and the Nuraloop pulling just a little bit ahead of the Quiet Mini. But those three for me are all excellent examples of sound quality. I think the Nuraloops are a bit less neutral than the Buds Pro. They're a bit more dynamic and lively, but again, that could come down to where I did my profile and the background noise that might have been present at the time. I have found that is one way to throw out and or adjust the tuning as you want it to, is to choose different locations with or without background noise to just tweak the profile a little bit. It's a shame that it's kind of a hit and miss way of doing it rather than being able to apply your own custom EQ over the top of the profile, but it is what it is, and I'm not going to go into depth about it here in this review because it's going to take us away from the general comparison. One thing for me that does set the Nuraloops apart is they use what they call their immersion system to produce a really exceptional bass even at higher levels. So whilst you may not want to push it to the absolute maximum levels despite it staying pretty clean, what it means is you can boost the bass a bit to deal with your background noise and your surroundings and still get really excellent quality bass. So for all of them, I think the Nuraloops do the best bass, but certainly the Pamu Quiet Mini and the Samsung Buds Pro produce excellent bass as well. So let's wrap all this up now with a bit of a conclusion. Having done a bunch of testing, playing with these, using them in everyday life, riding my bike with them, which, by the way, they don't at all work well on bikes. None of these sorts of products do, because the moment you get a bit of speed, you get wind noise through either the active noise cancelling or just general wind noise from the non-active open style design. So none of them are really good for noise cancelling. I'm hoping to be able to review some bone conduction earphones soon. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in seeing a bone conduction review. It would be the Aftershokz Aeroplex, I think they're called from memory. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that particular review or any other bone conduction earphones that you're familiar with. Let me know in the comments. So for general usage, walking, maybe running, certainly around the house in general, just usage situations or commuting, all of these have worked pretty well across the board. I've already covered off some of the flaws, being there was some minor connectivity issues with the Naenkas, there was the sound quality on the calls being not particularly good from the Boyas. They've all got their pros and cons to a degree. The stick style ones come out of your ears a bit more easily than the buds, but at the same time getting the buds to fit really nicely and get the right fit in the ear canal can be a bit more challenging than the stick style. They've all got their pros and cons. But for me, if I was to pull my favourites out of this list, it would probably go kind of every second model in terms of pricing order. I really like the Boyas for their sound quality alone. Again, they're not going to be great for phone calls, but if you're just looking for a pair of earphones to listen to, these are great, particularly at the price. My next choice would definitely be the Pamu Quiet Mini. I think these are fantastic, and out of the whole package, bang for buck, I think these are a really, really stellar option. From there, I'd skip past the Galaxy Buds Live. I like the openness of their sound, but overall I didn't enjoy the balance of their sound and that sucked out mid effect that they provide. So instead I'd go straight to the Samsung Galaxy Buds Pro. That doesn't mean I'm going to say no to the Nuraloops. I think the Nuraloops are still fantastic, but they're a little bit more niche because they do have the cable around the back of the neck and they have got the sound calibration. Out of all of these, if I could only choose to own one pair, it would come down, I think, for me to the Samsungs or the Pamus. But realistically, I'm probably going to keep and enjoy the Pamus, the Samsungs, and the Nuraloops, all for different situations. There's nothing wrong with the Boyas, the Naenkas, and the Buds Live. They're just not as good as those other three when it comes to sound quality, call quality, price in the case of the Pamus, and or call quality and noise cancelling. So for me, the Nuraloops are going to be my more active model. I feel like they're the most secure of all of them if I'm doing something where the bud's likely to fall out. I feel like the Samsung Galaxy Buds Pro are the best mixture of sound quality and compact, out of the way, no cables around my neck type of solution. And then the Pamus are a really nice, easy throw on. They fit perfectly every time because of their stick design with the shape and the seal of the IEM style tip. And so for me, they're a great option in terms of being budget, easy to fit, easy to wear, and highly enjoyable. So hopefully the overviews I've just provided for these have been useful to you. If you've got any questions of anything I forgot to cover, do let me know in the description and I'll do my best to answer there. Don't forget the discount code for the Naenka Lite Pros, particularly if you're looking for a budget option with good voice quality. These are a really good choice for calls. They're not the best in sound, but they're certainly not bad in sound either, and the fact that they do a better job than the Boyas for calls means that of the two budget options, the Naenkas are the one to go for if you want to make calls and listen to music as well. So I hope you found this review useful. If you have, I'd love it if you'd subscribe and hit the like button to help me keep bringing reviews like this to you. But for now, I'll leave it to the music, so happy listening and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.